Good afternoon. I am Carolyn Vermont, CEO for Habitat for Humanity of Coastal Fairfield County. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us this afternoon. I realize that some of you are on your lunch break, but do stay present on the screen if possible. As we move forward with today's presentation, please place your questions in the chat feature. A little bit about Habitat. Habitat for Humanity of Coastal Fairfield County seeks to build community and improve lives by partnering with low-income families, volunteers, and donors to build decent and affordable homes in stable and welcoming neighborhoods. At Habitat for Humanity of Coastal Fairfield County, we are committed to creating a culture where diversity, equity, and inclusion are central to our mission. Since we started in 1985, we have dedicated over 280 homes. I'm very excited about National Caribbean American Heritage Month, being a Caribbean person. And I'd like to share with you a little bit from our president, President Biden. In his 2023 proclamation on National Caribbean American Heritage Month, President Biden stated that during Caribbean American Heritage Month, we celebrate the achievements and dreams of the million of people of Caribbean origin now living in the United States, while honoring the shared history of joy and perseverance that has united and enriched lives across our region for centuries. There is no single Caribbean American identity. The mix of cultures, languages, and religion alive across the United States and the islands reflect the diversity of spirit that defines the American story. Meanwhile, our countries are bound by common values and a shared history, overcoming the yoke of colonialism, confronting the original sin of slavery, and charting new opportunities across borders and generations. Thank you, President Biden. At this time, I would like to introduce to you our presenter, Dr. Kwame Dunbar. Dr. Dunbar is a professor of finance at Worcester Polytechnic Institute's Business School. In addition to his extensive experience in teaching and research, he has a wealth of industrial experience working with several Fortune 500 companies in various capacities. Dr. Dunbar's research has appeared in leading economics and finance journals, such as Quantitative Finance, Economic Modeling, International Review of Financial Analysis, Finance Research Letters, Journal of Behavioral and Experimental Finance, amongst others. His research has received considerable attention via citations, and he regularly presents his work at leading international conferences and writes media pieces. His current research examines fintech for social good and sustainability. His primary research focus is empirical asset pricing and cryptocurrencies, focusing on fintech and futures market. His transformational work has contributed to various areas in finance that focus on digital assets, financial technologies, and digital transformation from the perspective of finance and economics. Dr. Dunbar also serves as the president of the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dunbar.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
Yes, so I want to thank Habitat for Humanity for having me today. And in particular, examining and discussing, National Caribbean Heritage Month. And in my talk today, I want to spend a little time, looking at, home ownership and how Caribbean nationals in particular have actually feared in the American dream in terms of home ownership. Now, one of the things, as Carolyn discussed my background, what we're doing at WPI, we are preliminarily a school of engineering, right? But what we do is that we're using technology to improve livelihood. Now, if I may just share my screen quickly here, one of the things I just wanted to showcase is recent work on immigration and migration, and using analytical tools to track migrants and see how we can improve the lives of individuals as they, during the migration process. One of the things that we find lacking is information, right? The immigrant community in general, for the most part, on arrival, there's not a lot of streamlined information. And as a group or community, most migrants are not sure what benefits are there, right? And we're not talking necessarily about handouts, but benefits to help in terms of their progression. So we're on the cutting edge or the forefront of this conversation, and our work that we're doing is helping to, we're working to shape policy that we believe will help in this regard. So that takes me to, I'm sorry about that, as I shift screens, to my presentation for today, that I want to spend a little time examining as we look at that progression of particularly for Caribbean nationals as they achieve the American dream. So when we talk about home ownership for Caribbean immigrants in the United States, as I have on the screen here, there's not a lot of data that we can work with. And that's one of the challenges that we work with ourselves as we try to understand, the immigrant community, population, or community, and as we look to see how we can help further the community. Now, most of the information that is gleaned, right, is from the Census Bureau. Every 10 years when new censuses are taken, individuals would clearly indicate their heritage, right? And whether it's first generation, second generation, et cetera, that provides some sort of information to us that we can use as we look to identify various groupings, and then, of course, working to understand some of the challenges that these groups face. Now, we know that homeownership is synonymous, right, with the American dream. It's usually the dream to own our own homes. And then, of course, that is significant in the sense that it contributes to what we consider to be wealth, right, here in the United States. So, it's the dream or the drive that makes most, that everyone would aspire to. Now, I just want to say, as we progress through my conversation later, we may see rates of home ownerships, right, which may not be high in some instances, but it has to be taken in context with the mindset, right, of most immigrants. Because some immigrants, right, and it's hard to quantify that that grouping who travels, abroad, right, move away. Some of them may not necessarily be inclined to own a home, because some may decide to relocate back to their countries of origin at some point in their lives, maybe towards retirement or so forth. So it's not priority number one. So if that number is 20%, 10%, we're not sure as yet, right? Because that would include a more detailed study to try to get that grouping. No, but what we do know, the absolute number of individuals from the Caribbean in particularly immigrating to the United States has grown, right? It grew up through the 1980s, but what I wanted to say, what we noticed between the censuses from the 1980s through the last that we had in about 2019, 2020, it has remained flat. I've provided some numbers here. For instance, and these are all data from the most recent US censuses, right? So in the 1960s, there were about 100, almost 200,000 in terms of Caribbean immigrants. In 1980, there was a significant jump, up to about 1.3 million. That moved to about 4.4 million in the most recent census. Now, again, if you notice what I say there is that it still hovers around that 9 to 10% range, right? Though the number seems to have gone up fourfold, it still remains at about 9 to 10%, and that's because the broader number of immigrants, right, went up overall. So with that, immigrants from the Caribbean region grew as that group, but of course, still staying within that 10% range. Now, diving into the census, right, and looking at the total number of immigrants to the United States. Within the census, a number of individuals identify themselves as Blacks originating from the Caribbean, right? So with that, we noticed that individuals coming from the Caribbean and Africa accounts for about 88% of all foreign-born individuals, right? That are coming to the United States. The Caribbean remains, however, one of the most common region for individuals of color who emigrates to the United States. We find that two of the largest areas that individuals emigrate from the Caribbean, includes Jamaica and Haiti in particular, with 16 and 15% respectively, right? Now, in terms of Jamaica, and I couldn't find exact numbers for Haiti, but for Jamaica, for instance, home ownership stands in the country at around maybe 65-70% there in Jamaica, and most of that is there's a legacy connection in most of that because family property tends to remain within the family for generations, right? With only a few new addition of property. Now, when we look at where are these immigrants going, we find that, and my graph or map to the right, it shows a little higher percentage because what it's looking at there, it's actually showing total immigrant population, right? But drilling down a little deeper and getting, just isolating the pieces for Caribbean nationals, they largely live in the Northeast or the South, going down into Texas, and of course, the Midwest region of the United States. Now, outside of that, there are certain metropolitan areas that seem to have larger, representation, such as New York City with Jamaican immigrants, Miami for Haitian immigrants, more in particular. We look up in Boston, which I didn't indicate here. There are other groups that seem to, make up a larger piece of the population there in the Boston metropolitan area. In DC, Trinidad and Tobago has a pretty sizable and good representation there. So in terms of incomes, which is one of the determining factor for actually home ownership, right? As we know, and as we'll see later, what we notice is that U.S. immigrants in general, right? Median incomes hovers around $63,000. Now, just a note, for those of us who are statisticians, median it's what we call a measure of central tendency, right? It's just a mid-value, it's a midpoint. So it doesn't mean that's where everyone is, right? Income-wise. The middle section of the population is around 63,000, but there could be individuals that are twice as high, right? Above the 63, not a lot of individuals obviously would be above that, but you know, a sizable amount of people could be above 63,000, with a significant number also hovering below and around 63,000. Now, US born Black population income is about 42,000. Black immigrants in general is about 57,000. But interestingly, if you notice, individuals from the Caribbean, their earnings are around 58,200. Now, this data came from, it's a combination of the census data that I pulled, and of course, Pew Research. At the very end of my presentation, I list these sources, right? So Caribbean nationals, you know, in drilling down, which I didn't bother to include this year, is that we find that their aspiration for higher education is fairly high relative to a number of individuals who immigrate, right? And I think, you know, a combination of education and that drive or aspiration helps to drive income levels that we're seeing here. Now, moving on to looking at home ownership, the average home ownership for the US population on a whole is about 64%, which, as I said before, when I looked at, I just picked one, you know, island nation, Jamaica, which is around 65,000. You know, one of the numbers I saw for Trinidad and Tobago was high. It was around closer to 70,000. So 70%, I'm sorry. So it's within those general areas, right, in terms of overall home ownership. Now, for immigrants as a whole here in the United States, it stands around 53%. And then, of course, when that data is parsed to look at, you know, that, you know, the proportion of individuals who are born in the United States, you know, who identify as Black, that's 42%. And then, of course, immigrants who identify as Black, it's also 42%. Again, you notice that the Caribbean immigrants, they jump out in the data below, where home ownership is comparable to those coming from South America, around 49%. So what are some of the things that impact home ownership among, you know, and again, I'm singling out, you know, individuals from the Caribbean? Well, some of the factors that influence home ownership, what we found in our research work, is it's listed here, right? It's a confluence of all these factors. It hovers around incomes, education, access to loan, and I have here asymmetric information, employment, credit history, and I just want to talk about all of these, right? Because it's not any one factor. Yes, incomes are a key factor, and this is a factor not only for Caribbean nationals, but for everyone as a whole, because income levels are required for qualification for purchasing of our homes, right? Education is also another factor, because individuals immigrating to the United States, not only from the Caribbean, but what we find is that sometimes, you know, educational experiences or work experiences may not move you to the top of the employment chain, right? You know, these individuals usually may have to start at the bottom, you know, coming to the United States, because the experience you have in some foreign location may not all, you know, those skills may not all be transferable, right? For various reasons. So these individuals as they relocate here, find that, it's starting over, right? And it usually sets immigrants back, in terms of their ability to get ahead pretty quickly. Established credit history is another area that is problematic because it takes a while for for immigrants to realize and understand some of the ways that they could actually establish their credit, establish themselves to move forward. Now, as as I talk about credit history and I talk about access to loans and asymmetric information, we have also, as institutions of higher education, not only in our research work, we have taken a proactive approach in trying to educate individuals to be more responsible financially, and also, being able to navigate some of the challenges that they may face in their personal lives, financial lives, as they try to make various informed decisions. Now, even for the individuals who are born here in the United States, American citizens, right? They themselves are not fully informed as to some of the tools and services that are out there for individuals who are trying to buy a house, right? Now, each year I run this class, and this class is offered to engineers, right? It's offered to doctoral students, it's offered to undergraduate students alike. And as a first-time home buyer, there are programs out there that assist the home ownership process, right? Can make the home ownership process a bit easier for individuals. Most people or individuals are not aware of this, right? I talk to international students who are actually living here. I talk to first-generation students. I talk to, a wide cross-section of individuals. And what we find is that in most cases, banks don't tell a home buyer, right, for various reasons, that there are programs that can make the home ownership process a bit easier. I'm going to just quickly tag team into what Chafa, I spoke to Valeria via email exchange, and I was aware of this Chafa program for a while here in Connecticut, right? Where, there are interesting assistantships that helps the first-time homebuyer process. Talking to individuals in the immigrant community, most of them are not aware of this because, as I said before, you walk into most banks and you want to obtain a mortgage. They will share with you, what their financing costs are, but there's never the intent to better understand, where are you in the process of purchasing a home, and here's a program that can benefit you. Like I say to people who participate in my, my educational programs in terms of personal finance. The first-time homebuyer program is the first time you buy a house, right? It's not the second time. So you can't buy a house and then you say, oops, by the way, I wasn't aware of it. And the second time around, I want to participate. No, you're out of those types of programs. Being aware of those can help, right? The homeownership process for the immigrant community. Being aware of these programs, I recalled, I believe a few years ago, my involvement with the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority program. There was an educational aspect to it, that thought about responsibility of, your financial obligation and responsibility, et cetera, as individuals got involved with this program. Now, there are many other like programs that can assist individuals. The state of Connecticut, for instance, have put up, I think they indicate they're putting up $75 million into next year's program to assist that first-time homebuyer program. In Miami, which has another large immigrant community, they themselves indicated I think 2 weeks ago, that they're actually strengthening and increasing that program also for the immigrant community. So there are programs out there that can help to make the process a bit more, the ease or transition to such a program much easier. But the fact is that, and that's why, for myself, I said here asymmetric information, because it's not freely available. It's ad hoc in terms of what is out there and being made available to prospective home buyers. Okay, that's it. I noticed there are a couple of questions in the chat. So should I?
Whoops. We can get right to the questions,
Yes.
Dr. Dunbar. So here's one from Ken. Were these factors in the economy, either Caribbean or US, that drove the migration in the 1960s and 1970s?
Well, thank you. If I think understand that right, the factors that I just want to make sure I understand the question. Are we saying that is it the same factors that's driving migration? Is that the question?
Ken, did you want to jump in?
Sure, thank you. No, I was wondering, were there economic influences either in the US that pulled more immigrants in, or economic consequences in the Caribbean that pushed people to migrate?
Thank you, Ken. So yes, that's correct. That's correct. So, pre-1980, right? Going back to the early 60s, there was that period of reconstruction that was taking place in the United States, which provided a pull, right, for individuals seeking employment, work, gainful employment, or the use of their skills, who migrated heavily at that time. Now, there's been a slight shift, over, since the early 70s, that led to more of an economic call or incentive to have individuals move from the Caribbean to the United States. And again, in saying that, it's in general, right? It can be generalized to other communities.
Okay, thank you. Here's one from Angie. What are some of the more common careers of Caribbean immigrants in the United States?
Yeah. So what we find, and thank you, Angie, what we find is that the field is pretty broad. When I looked at where, Caribbean immigrants are, they're in education, they're in medicine, they're in the arts, and craft. They're in, so it's pretty broad, pretty diverse, and there's no difference in terms of, where, most of these individuals will find themselves. And in our recent conference at WPI that looked at, various groupings, that we had over the summer that look at innovations, right, within in immigration analytics, and in terms of immigration itself, there was no specific one area that stood out.
Okay, thank you. Here's one from Josue. How does the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport work to uplift Caribbean immigrants community in Fairfield County? Do you foresee opportunity to partner with Habitat or other organization to address the issues you're describing here?
Wow, but that's a long question. Thank you for that one.
Like two or three questions, right?
So, as you may know, one of our mission is helping, first generation, primarily individuals in getting an education. And, as we work through first generation, our mission has expanded, because now It's working with individuals with Caribbean heritage within the West Indian community, within the Bridgeport and Greater Fairfield region. As you can understand, missions are hard, right? Because they kind of constrain us based on what we can do. It doesn't preclude us from working with Habitat for Humanity in sharing, information that we have, because, even, within my work as an individual, my personal work as, a college professor, that's what brought me to the WIAAGB, right? Because I saw synergies where I could actually contribute to an organization that's working to improve the lives of Caribbean immigrants. So we could, there are areas that we could explore, with Habitat, that we see that there are shared, goals or views that we could actually work in the future.
Okay, thank you. Here's one from Kristen. Do you have an idea of how many Caribbean homeowners there are in Bridgeport or even in Fairfield County as a whole?
Thank you for that question. Great question. I don't at this point in time, do have that information. I would need to look a little more, do a much deeper dive into, what the census data bears out. Because as one of the things I should have said, as I clearly tried to say earlier, is that the information is not as readily available or clearly demarcated sometimes based on how individuals may choose to report. So, but I will redouble my efforts to look more, as I look more regionally as, to what that is.
Okay. And here's one from Sheila. Is it easier or harder for Caribbeans to receive citizen status in the US?
Well, Sheila, thanks again. It's not more difficult from what, and this is a little outside of my work. It's more, one of my colleagues, who is doing immigration analytics, based on what he has seen, it's not more difficult for them. It's what we find is that most of the challenges seem to be universal so far. Okay.
And now Angie, she would like to hear a little bit about your hometown. So tell us about your hometown in Jamaica.
Yes, thank you. So hometown is in St. Catherine, Portmore. It's a community of, they usually refer to it as a dormitory community because it's just right outside the capital city. It's one of those planned development. Back in the days, they would refer to it as PUD, planned urban development. Things, and of course, life, was a bit different, right, from the corporate era. Now, most individuals there were homeowners, the larger percentage. And of course, unlike most developments, so for instance, the city of Kingston, where you had generations of individuals living in a region, right? The creation of the Portmore community being an urban development, individuals moving in there were required to purchase, right, their individual units. Now, over time, there was an increase in rental properties, but for the most part, most individuals migrating there were from all over. So you had a mixture of individuals from the 14 parishes pretty much in that community.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is from Liz. What are the different ways to reach the Caribbean community to inform them of home ownership?
So that's a very, very good question, and it's a challenging question because most individuals within the immigrant community as a whole, right? Most individuals, first generation, well, not first generation, but those who are immigrants themselves, may be holding down 2 to 3 jobs at a time. And to get that, get an audience with individuals like these, the best way may be through community organizations such as churches, right? To educate, to have various church groupings, where these individuals may be part of that family, be able to inform them, right, of what is available to the community. Community outreach groups, we can redouble our efforts, in what we do to reach these various individuals within these communities. Because, as I said, it even for students in college, a lot of these students in college, I mentor, as I talk to them about some of these programs, they share openly with me that their parents are not aware of this, right? Their parents are actually learning from them what they're learning from us in helping to try to navigate these waters.
Okay. So I'm going to jump over Sheila's and go to Opal's question. She wants to hear from Habitat. How are we working to reach the Caribbean community? Maribel or Leo, would you like to say a few words? If not, it's okay. I know I'm putting you on the spot here. But how are some of the ways through family services are you working to reach the Caribbean community?
Valencia is working on recruiting the families, Black communities in Caribbean communities. She's attending some events in churches and any event that she will be available to attend. She's doing a great job doing that. As a family services, we are doing our best to help the Caribbean community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maribel, did you want to add anything?
So we have also information in our website available for whomever is interested in what Habitat does and a program. And we do try to reach out as much of the community, and including anybody in the community through any means or ways. But we're trying to put it out there in our website for everybody to be able to get the access.
Okay, thank you. And so what I would like to add to that is our, and they've both said it, Leo and Maribel, but our constant outreach, our constant partnerships. One of our partnerships is with the West Indian American Association of Greater Bridgeport, where over many years, they have been the sponsor of our children Christmas party. They have been involved in volunteering with our bill days in the past over the years. And so with those relationships, those partnerships, that's one way that, we've been able to reach, a segment of the Caribbean community. But I think as a whole, the whole Caribbean community, we're just in constant contact, with them. We are where they are, whichever way we can partner with them, whether it's, setting up a table at the events that they're having, whether it's, International Children's Day at Seaside Park or any other event, that they invite us to, and then we try our best, to let everyone know that at Habitat, we're an inclusive organization, and we value diversity, we value ethnicity, so we value everyone. So we're always making sure there's an opportunity for others to join us from, different cultures.
Yeah. And, if I may just also add to that quickly, another growing trend is that there are businesses out there that are actually coming into classrooms, right? Talking to students. So for instance, JP Morgan Chase, they have been reaching out to us, and they have actually come into my classes to talk to students about various loan products, right? Not about, so far, not about, first-time homebuyer program, but they've spoken about other products that they offer and how, students could actually going out, what are their options in, purchasing a car, various product, loan products and so forth. So, various groups, other groups are doing different things, but that's another avenue, right, that we could actually have, because institutions of higher learning are welcoming these contributions today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions from our guests? Victor, I noticed you just joined. I don't know if you had a question. You can write it in the chat, or you can, speak verbally if you'd like, not to put anyone on the spot. But Dr. Dunbar, I'm just curious, I'm always thinking about the way people are treated because, they're different. And, once 9/11 happened, there were so many groups that, became suspect and just being treated differently because, where they're from, or, the complexion is darker. And some cultures were really affected more than others. For some cultures, it was just dangerous for them to just walk down the street or dress, the way they normally dress, because they would be targeted. But since 9/11, how do you feel life has been for Caribbeans? Has it changed life for us in America, or is it the same? Has it gotten better, worse?
That's a very, very good question. And from what I've seen, it has not been as impactful on Caribbean immigrants as it has been on some other demographic groups, right? Yes, there are challenges for, individuals coming from the Caribbean, but, again, as I said, it's not as bad as, we've seen it in other groups. Now at WPI, for instance, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, where, I'm at, we value diversity, equity, and inclusivity very much, right? It's a part of our DNA, a hallmark of who we are. And, for our students, we let our students understand that diversity of opinion and thought, right, is welcome, right? So it's not, it hasn't been a problem in our campus, in our students. And by the way, in mentioning our campus, right, there, we do have a population of Caribbean immigrants there on campus. I've met our students there. We have students from Haiti, from Jamaica, from the Dominican Republic, from Trinidad, you name it. There's a representative group there. So, and one of the things for me is to ensure, as, a minority faculty member, that they do feel welcome, they do feel valued, and, the community feels as if, we're doing a good job in what we do for them there. So again, we've seen groups or other demographic groups that have seen it more significant than the Caribbean immigrants.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Anyone else have a question? Feel free. This is, we have a few more minutes before we wrap up. If you would just like to unmute and ask a question for Dr. Dunbar, or if you have a comment before we close out. Anyone? Okay, well, I want to thank you all for joining us. I realize some of you are off camera, it's your lunch break, but you're here. Kristen, you just came on camera. Is that because you had something to say, or?
Well, I wanted to send at least a chat to say I really enjoyed it, because I actually liked in this session how we had some statistics in there, and so I really appreciated the presentation, and now I don't have to write the chat.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kristen. And I did share the presentation with Carolyn, so it's available to each and every one.
Okay, okay. Anyone else? Any comments, questions?
I too enjoy the presentation, Dr. Dunbar. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
And I think Sheila may have signed off, but she did share a link in the chat also.
Yes.
That may be helpful to everyone. Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay, well, Dr. Dunbar, thank you so much. Like Kristen said, I really appreciated seeing all, the data statistics that you shared. I learned a lot today also. And I see Andrea, excellent presentation. Thank you, Dr. Dunbar. And I really appreciate you all taking the time. Now, our next CEO series will be September 27th for National Hispanic Heritage Month. Certainly you will be getting newsletter from us, emails reminding you of that as we get closer to that date. So I'm hoping September 27th, you all will be able to join us again for National Hispanic Heritage Month. But, thank you again. I really appreciate you, Dr. Dunbar, and really appreciate all of you for spending time with us today. And I just hope you enjoy the rest of this wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carolyn. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Everyone.